What's up, everybody? Brady Figuel here, coming at you with a review for the new Warfield album With the Old Breed, released last Friday, April 4th. I'm just going to get straight to the point with this. This record is a fucking modern thrash clinic. These guys are a German thrash trio, and this is actually only their second album that's came out, and their first one came out all the way back in 2018. And their lyrics focus primarily on social, political, and historical narratives. The title of this album, With the Old Breed, actually refers to, back in World War II, the 1st Marine Division at the time from the U.S. was referred to as the Old Breed, which in terms of thrash, I think immediately sets them apart. Just this kind of lyrical theme and sound as a result of that theme. Several of the songs on this album do kind of have somewhat of like a militant atmosphere to them, which, let me just say, any new ideas that are brought into thrash metal that don't just blatantly kind of take influence from other subgenres is the best way to get me invested into a new thrash metal album. Like, I reviewed that Warbringer album that came out last month, and like they're one of those bands where like everyone's hyping them up as like thrash revival. But for me, the thrash moments, the pure thrash moments on that album were the most underwhelming parts on that album. That album was at its best when it ventured outside of thrash metal. And just overall, in general, in terms of thrash, I feel like there's this underlying notion of that, okay, this stuff has kind of said all it's going to say. There are only so many new ideas you could put into thrash metal without just making it sound like another subgenre. And for me, a bulk of new thrash metal albums, whether it's from a legacy band or a newer band, kind of ends up just sounding derivative when it is just going for like a pure thrash sound. All of those elements that I just talked about are what make this album so fucking amazing and mind-blowing to me. This isn't like a perfect album. I'm still going to have some criticisms about it, but just these songs, several of these songs being as good as they are, the riffs being as fresh and sharp as they are, this album single-handedly just like rejuvenates thrash metal for me. You could maybe say it's restored my faith in the genre, in a sense that it proved to me that, okay, I can still enjoy a modern thrash record if it's done right. And this record is done right. It really is. The best thing about this album for me is just these fucking killer riffs. The riffs on literally all of these songs just fucking rip. And real quick, before I get into specifics, I have to shout out Max Gray, Metal Planet, and his weekly Friday series where he talks about the albums dropping, which is actually how I discovered this album. So Max, if you're seeing this, shout out to you, bro. Link is in the description to his channel. So yeah, now getting into this album. It was the two singles in particular, Appetitive, Aggression, and Soul Conqueror, that immediately had me hooked and had me hyped to hear the rest of the album. Both of these songs are kind of similar in a sense that they start out with a pretty infectious, groovy riff, but it only ends up being kind of the intro of the song, and then it kicks into the actual main riff, which is just that much more monstrous in comparison to that intro riff. It's almost like those intro riffs are building up, but then it kind of ends up faking you out when this whole nother riff comes in place of it. And I'm not even sure if I could say in place of it, because those intro riffs are still pretty fleshed out. Like, it's not like they are just these little glimpses that don't feel like they're explored enough. These parts are explored enough, and then that main riff kicks in, and it just like, it takes the song to a whole nother level. That kind of main groove, or second main groove, if you want to call it that, in Soul Conqueror in particular, is my favorite riff on this album. It's just a fucking beast. The first track on your Melting Mass is another song that kind of has that similar structure and formula to it, but in this song, the riffs almost feel like they're piling up and one-upping each other with every shift before you get this like quirky little guitar lick and the verses start with, of course, the vocals. I think it should be highlighted here that the three tracks that I have mentioned as highlights so far are literally the first three tracks sequentially on this album. And despite them having somewhat similar formulas, these riffs and grooves just go so fucking hard that it never feels like it's blending together, or like that it's turning into like a stale formula. It feels fresh with every new song that comes in. That's how good the riff writing is on this album. Not only that, but after these 3 tracks, the album never even gives that formula a chance to become stale, because from there, it doesn't really return. In terms of other highlights on here riff writing wise, Tie the Rope has this awesome, more kind of mid-tempo groove, mostly because of how the drums are playing more of those halftime grooves over that thrashy riff. And the riff and the note choices themselves do kind of take on a slightly darker tone. I don't really want to say blackened, but those kind of subtle elements of just a bit more darkness rather than pure anger and aggression. And another song that pulls off that more mid-tempo feel is track 4, Fragmentation. And I especially love how in this song, the gang vocals sound a bit more like distant as opposed to being like front and center and dominating the mix. That's just one element that does give this song of the album somewhat of like a militant quality, because it does kind of bring to mind like Marines or Army men chanting or yelling in unison. The main riff on Inhibition Atrophy is another highlight for me on this album. The note choices in that song just sound so chaotic and frantic, almost like they are somewhat of like a soundtrack to war, in a sense that they sound like this barrage just raining down on you. And they're split up by these more open chord sections that allow the listener kind of like a chance to breathe before they're just launched back into those, again, super aggressive riffs. And the title track, which actually closes out the album, as far as the melodies and the note choices in these guitar parts, they do take on somewhat of like an element of sadness and grievance, which is definitely a breath of fresh air at the end of the album. The notes played on the guitar in this song do bring to mind like maybe the aftermath of a brutal war or brutal battle, where you're kind of realizing as a survivor, despite the fact that you've won, how much have you lost, or how many of your comrades have fallen. Just ideas like that are what come to mind from just the melodies that this song displays. It's very dramatic, I think is the best way of putting that. I mean that in a good way. While there isn't a whole lot of stylistic diversity on this album, it's pretty much a full-on thrash metal record through and through. I will say the track Gasp, which is like over 7 minutes long, does have this cool, very like murky, doom metal influenced intro that I thought definitely added something to the album. And again, that main chord progression on Tie the Rope kind of does that a little bit, just in the overall darkness and ominous feeling I get from those note choices. Overall, I really don't think there's any bad songs on here, but I do have some criticisms. For one, as much as I enjoy that intro to the song Gasp, it's just too long of a song at the end of the day. There's some cool parts in it. Like I said, love the intro. There's that really fast double bass section with some like pulsating, I think they're choir vocals in the background. That sounds fucking sick. I just feel like all of the ideas on this song still could have been there, but they could have made it like a 4, maybe 5 minute song, and it would have been a lot more repeatable, a lot more inviting, a lot more easily digestible. Because also, keep in mind, this is the second to last song on the album. And the album is pretty stylistically uniform. So having a 7+ minute song at the way end of the album that also pretty snugly fits in the same uniform sound that we've heard so far, it might be a little bit of a chore to get through in the full album context. And it is kind of a shame, because I do think if they shortened the song and condensed it a little bit, it would have been one of the best songs on the album. Song-wise, though, that's pretty much all I got. The other criticisms I have are more on like a full album span and something that kind of tends to affect every song when they're put together. The first one being that despite this being as killer of a thrash record as it is, there are times on here where I do wish they ventured out at least a little bit stylistically. I think, like I said, just a little bit more at parts would have gone a long way. And they still could have easily made this a full-on thrash record with having some subtle, like I said, branching out here. Because just listening to the songs that I already said maybe do that slightly, like Tie the Rope, I know that if they put a little bit more emphasis on some blackened elements in that song, it would have been fucking sick. Not that the song isn't already sick, but it would have been more sick. And same with the title track. I think maybe like some subtle power metal or mellow death influences would have emphasized these emotions a little bit more and made the song a little bit more memorable. Again, not that it isn't a great song, it is. there's just that little part of me that wants to hear a little bit more outside of the box thinking here. And my other album long criticism, I should say, is the drumming gets a little repetitive, not gonna lie. While the more mid-tempo tracks do provide somewhat of a departure in here, like Fragmentation and most of Gasp, the majority of the aggressive cuts on here and the actual thrashy parts where the song is just at its fastest tempo-wise, it's like all the same drum beat going on. It's skank beats the entire time. For anyone who doesn't know what a skank beat is, it sounds kind of like this. You've heard that, right? It's like the most popular thrash beat, which, going off of that, I understand why they're so present on here, because this is clearly a thrash album. But, I mean, some reverse skank beats might have worked in many of these songs. Maybe throw some more blast beats in. Maybe do some more rhythmic stuff with the bass drum so it isn't just bass snare, bass snare, bass snare the entire time. I'm not knocking the drum performance at all. Like, these parts are executed very well, but from a songwriting standpoint, I think there could have been a little bit more versatility there. But, I mean, the riffs are great. The drums at least complement them well. It's not like they're playing shit that doesn't fit the guitars. So they get the job done at the end of the day. So I can't really knock them a whole lot from that. And at the end of the day, this is such a great fucking album. Production-wise, everything sounds super just fucking explosive. I think the vocals on here are great. They highlight the more extreme side of thrash metal without, like I said, making it turn into death metal or some other subgenre. And the album does maintain that kind of militant vibe the entire time, which I was hoping it would. So yeah, shout out to these guys. I hope to hear more from them. I'm going to score this album a 26 out of 30. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to comment your thoughts on this album below if you've heard it, and subscribe to the channel for more rock and metal-related content. I got my Instagram, Spotify, Threads links in the description of the video. Thank you guys again for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.